Funding for The Desert Speaks has been provided by ASARCO Incorporated. ASARCO, producing the metals we all need, respecting the environment we all value. And headquartered in Tucson, Arizona, Intergroup Healthcare Corporation is a managed healthcare company serving more than 250,000 members. And by the Arizona Game and Fish Heritage Fund, Arizona's lottery dollars working for wildlife.
In a way, it's true that we all still live off the land, I guess. But it's not a very personal relationship. We aren't familiar, the way our ancestors were, with the land's personality, its habits and variations. That's another one of those things we've left up to specialists to remember. But what if even the specialists started to forget? The plants of the Sonoran Desert alone have generated a lot of wisdom, gathered over thousands of years. But the wisdom is decomposing. Oh, there are still pockets of it here and there. People who remember what each plant can do, like the Mayo tribe. Down at the southern end of the state of Sonora, the Mayo still have a close working relationship with plants.
The Mayos live in an area that is, from a botanical standpoint, extraordinary in that the north and south meet in this area. It's the tropics that meet the southern extremity of the Sonoran Desert. And some people say it's where the Sonoran Desert plants, many of them, came from.
Con la espina de maguey y espina de vinorama, 3 espinas para el mal de orín.
From our experiences with working with the Mayos, we found that they have uses for most every plant.
En octubre comienzan a maduran negros.
¿Y cómo se llama en el dialecto otra vez?
Jupari.
Jupari.
There are very few plants that they don't, at least in their memories, have some use for.
Chicayota, da unas bolitas, calabazas, es el monte. Eso se agarra y se machuca. Y a los chamacos se les lava la cabeza para que si hay chamacos piojosos en la escuela o donde sea, que no se les pegue.
There's a great difference between the Mexican treatment of Indians and the United States treatment of Indians. The clear policy of the Mexican government has always been the complete assimilation of Native and Indian peoples into the dominant Mexican culture. While in the United States, the policy has been as much as possible to incarcerate Indians on reservations. The entire dynamics of working with Indian populations is different in this country of Mexico.
Es Josuena, el Mayo.
The Mayos still inhabit their ancestral lands, and the Yaquis still inhabit their ancestral lands. The Seris do. Though means that you're dealing with a people whose roots are probably stronger in the land than many American groups, simply because they haven't been pushed around as much down here.
Cuando se espanta la zorra, que lo haya uno, hace una colota grande. Pues le dicen cola de zorra el güirote. El zacate.
One of the things we run into is that Mayo is a much earthier language than Spanish. And it becomes difficult for us to know to what extent we really translate these things. We have Mayo terminology for a tree which is skunk's ass. We have one for a vine that is pig's turd. And we have one that we just recently found is rabbit balls.
Huevo de conejo. Tabo bicho.
And those are not used in polite Spanish translations or in English translations, but they give you some insight into the frankness of the Mayo culture, so we want to use those. But you know, we have certain scientific protocols. What do we do with those things? So I mean, my attitude is use them the way they say them and let's go. That'll tell us a lot about the people we're dealing with. Totora.
Totora.
Cresta de gallo.
Cresta de
Okay.
What I need to do now is put these examples in a field press here so that we can take a piece back as a scientific voucher of the plant and what our Mayo Indian informant called it. This is just a quick and easy way to get them flattened in the field. Well, Alamos is in what we call the tropical deciduous forest. And it has two primary seasons, a dry season in the spring, early summer, and a wet season in the wintertime. But in reality, it changes about every 6 weeks. It seems to have a different character, different things flower. And so we've tried to come throughout the year to sample the flora in different conditions.
Cuando tiene fruta así, igualito a las llaves de venado. Está la fruta aquí abajo.
Ajá.
La frutita. Se come la fruta con esta sazón.
¿Hay muchos aquí o es
Hay una que
escasas?
otra mata, sí. Hay,
¿O es escasas?
es escasón, pero sí hay.
Bueno, there's a certain urgency to the study, and that the oldest Mayos are the only ones who, well, in some areas, who are really still fluent in the Maya language.
Huya chivo, lengua mayo.
And they're the only ones that still retain extensive knowledge of the plants and their uses and the medicinal uses.
¿Qué hace la goma?
Le tumba la muela, pero si le pega todos los dientes también. Necesita que la pura muela que quiere tumbar, ¿no?
Certain kinds of plant uses will transcend the acculturation. So many of the uses of trees for construction, those will still be common knowledge several generations from now.
Y ya hay palo que no le entra la polilla. Y la guásima sí, todo el palo cascarudo. Esta tiene la cáscara muy gruesa. Cuando está la luna nueva, mucha polilla, mucha agua. La misma cáscara revive y mucha polilla. Se pica y no dura. Y así dura mucho. Se pone muy maciza. Dura mucho la madera. Amaneció allí. Muy bajita el cerro. Y todo el tiempo está bueno hasta que está por aquí así. Ya de ahí para allá ya no.
Marcelino told us not to buy some trees from a certain place, or some chairs, because the trees that they made them out of were not cut during the full moon. One trip we were down here, some people did buy some from that particular manufacturer. When we got them back to Tucson, where they sat, there were little piles of sawdust because of the insects that had gotten them in. He warned us that the insects would get in if you cut them at the wrong time. There are all kinds of other moon-affected plantings of trees, cutting of trees, planting of the living fence posts. As a matter of fact, they plant some trees that will grow into fences. Those have to be planted at the right time of the moon and the right time of the month, the right time of the year. These are tried and true methods that they've used over the years, and we take it very seriously and are trying to get all the data and then try to know what to do with it from there. But obviously, they know what they're talking about.
Aquí luego hay echa brotos, mucho broto, no crece luego. Un año ya tiene palos gruesos, largos. Es muy rápido para crecer, muy rápido. Mira, que no le puedan quitar. Cáscara esta. Machucándole, echándole el agua de uso, pueden andarla tomando. Es buena para los riñones, muy fresca.
Ethnobotany is a fairly new field that I think only in the last decade or so has it been taken really seriously, and have pharmaceutical companies become very interested. There are 50%, is one figure I hear, of all of the current pharmaceuticals are based upon compounds derived from plants.
Este es el remedio. Se hace tónico también.
Tónico, okay.
Es para el cuerpo. Para que quede joven, fuerte.
Como tú, ¿qué no?
Podríamos decir los grandes, y nosotros poco a poco fuimos aprendiendo. Para nosotros es una cosa muy valiosa, porque al estar lejos del pueblo donde no hay medicina, ¿no? Por lo pronto vamos a escarbar una raíz. Es una herencia que no tiene fin, ¿no? Si nosotros faltamos, pero ellos ya después van siguiendo. Ya sabemos que esas plantas sí nos han servido mucho. Y lo siguen sirviendo. Y esto les nombran bancos vaqueros. ¿Por qué? Porque tienen abiertitas las patas.
La construcción de estas patas.
Para que no se caigan. Por eso están abiertitas.
Our principal goal has always been in this to make the knowledge that the Mayas have available to the world at large, and with the hope that people can appreciate what the Mayas have and then be able to make their way of life more secure.
The new interest in how native people use plants has a name, ethnobotany. It's about saving what's left of this wisdom. But collecting the wisdom isn't as simple as taking dictation from the Mayos. The two American researchers who visit the Mayo settlements near the historic town of Alamos realize they're asking to be let in on something precious and personal. So their relationship with the Mayo has become personal. Each researcher's focused on his own half of the study, one on the plants and the other on the people.
Okay, my next number is 94,569. Try to space them out so that they'll stack a little bit evenly. Anyway.
If they may get mold on them if they don't dry out.
It seemed fairly strong. As part of the ethnobotany project, we have numbered about 400 specimens. This is that bizarre root parasite that's related to sand food, but it's same genus, Phylisma. The specimens will get a permanent typed label that'll have the scientific name and who identified it, the locality, any things about growth form or flower color or the habitat. If we're given any Spanish or Mayo common names, those go on. Let's see what's next. Oh yeah, that little pectus that we got from Teachive. Do you remember what they called it?
Yeah, this is the one they called Goisisi in Mayo.
Goi means coyote, doesn't it?
Goi is coyote.
And what is Sisi?
Sisi is urine, so it's coyote piss.
Why'd they call it that?
He says it's because it has a strong aroma. C-I-S-I, although it could be S-I-S-I. Or
The specimen and the label are mounted on heavy white paper sheets that can be filed permanently. Some of those dried herbarium specimens have been around since Linnaeus' days in the 1700s. You notice I've tried to turn some leaves up and some down so it's easy to see the
when you open it up, you can get both sides of the leaves.
You can see the upper and lower surface.
Yeah, and
so go ahead and squeeze two on. The ethnobotanical project here is part of several larger general floristic studies. And as a part of this various botanical works, we are occasionally encountering species that are new to science. I think it's Melampodium. I think it was Divaricatum. Ejote is
ejote is the word for the legume or the bean.
The pod.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is one you may want to have the chemist take a look at, because if the burros and the cows want it, it's bound to have some fairly interesting chemicals in it.
Yeah, and
go ahead and squeeze two. We find many species that have never been recorded from Sonora, that are range extensions from the tropics to the south, and each one of them. Unlike the United States, which is fairly well known botanically, the likelihood of finding something exciting is real good. So either this is an early flowering of the common pectus, or it's a different species.
Mm-hmm. I hope it's a new species.
Even the Mayos have relied on their own specialists. And when these plant specialists are consulted, it's usually for something to do with homemaking, including, literally, making homes.
Without too much difficulty, we find that in most towns, there is somebody who knows the plants better than anyone else. We've been able to find that person, and generally it's the men who work in the field who know what the plants are.
Mucha cáscara esa se echa en más mucha agua, pero él es así, es suficiente así.
It's the women who always have to stay at home who know how to prepare them and how to use them. The men use them in construction. The women use them in materials for the house and in medicines and dyes and things like that.
Esta es la escoba para barrer con él. Y este trastashinoli lo usan para los riñones. Para eso lo toma mi mamá para los riñones. Y este es el golondrina. Es raíz de matanena que le dicen.
Sí, se curan las llagas de los animales, que la gente también se lavan con él.
Esta raíz de salvia es para los venteados. Es hoja y flor.
Y todo esto lo pusieron entonces en 1940, ¿no? Cortaron mucha madera, pues, para usar en las casas aquí, ¿no? Porque hay muchas casas aquí, por eso cortaron muchas, ¿no? Y ahorita casi no hay.
Mezquita y otra es para los ríos. Eso que está en el metate ahí.
Este es amapa, este es huiloche, este es copalquín.
If you look in southern Sonora at the homes that are perhaps more than 50 years old, you will find all of them contain local woods. Very high quality local woods, and you will find that they are ingeniously built, that they are built with the climate in mind, they are comfortable, and they will probably last for generations.
Ya se casaron, todas estas hijas son mías, estas que andan aquí. Aquí nacieron y ya está la casa ya hecha. Sí, estos son nietos, los que están viendo aquí. Estos todos son nietos.
Ya estaba la cuna esa cuando nací yo y nacieron todos mis hermanos y los mayores y sus hijos también.
La madera es giote, ¿no? Mezcal. Cada año sale y lo cortan, ¿no? Y nosotros lo agarramos y le dimos cerco. Todo eso.
Among the Mayos, the weaving of serapes or blankets has a long history, going back a couple of hundred years, and they still make a fair number of those, although the number has probably been cut in half in the last 20 or 30 years.
Pues lo aprendí con mis abuelos, con mi mamá, esas tejían. Mi mamá, pues su mamá tejía, su abuelita, y luego con mi abuela pues, aprendí con mi mamá. Cuando está comiendo bien la borrega, los 6 meses, ¿no? Para los 7. Así se cosecha la lana del borrego. Hay de todos colores, cafés, blancos, plomo, negro. Hay pinturas que las pinta uno en la raícita varo. Con la goma de mezquite. Esto, mira. En una mata que le dicen el chijo.
La mano se tiñe, las manos de uno se tiñen.
Y en la flor de San Juanico pinta amarillo.
Y la florecita sale de esta.
Cuando la luna está tierna, no está nueva, no pinta, no agarra color. Y cuando la luna está sazona, los colores agarran más fuertes, más bien pintados.
Así cuando se echa en bolsa se seca así.
Ajá.
No se descaliente. Descalentando se le quita la tinta. Se pinta en la hoja, en agua, en la hoja del agua. Eso se destiñe con el sol. Y la que se pinta en los miados, ese no se destiñe.
Por eso es importante tener el miado.
Sí, por eso se echa en miado. Y así ya cuando lo va a sacar, lo seca y lo echa en agua. La madeja que va a sacar, pues, sea madeja o sea paja, lo echa en agua para que se salga la peste de el miedo.
aroma.
Sí.
Not every plant comes home. There are a few which the Mayos harvest and bring to the world outside. But the number of Mayos doing the selling are few, and it's a long walk.
Son de aquí a Cinas que hallamos ahí en Guasaguari. Aquí están en las Joconas, ¿te acuerdas? Sí, es la misma clase, nomás que este es del mar, este es de la costa.
So es encina
de la costa, sí.
De la costa.
Sí.
Other than a few medicinal herbs, what we know is that oregano is harvested and sold. The chiltepín, the tiny little chili peppers, are sold. And the pitaya fruits, the organ pipe fruits, are sold and marketed in Navojoa. That's probably the most important wild crop that they have.
Huicha. La espina se llama huicha.
Now, pitaya fruit is widely admired in Mexico and eagerly sought after. And pitayas are dried to make a very much sought after dried fruit as well, and thought to have some medicinal value. It's very prized. It's delicious. It's very, very sweet. It's like a swirl fruit, only I think it's better. And if you are very thirsty, it can quench your thirst like virtually no other plant. And it has potential of being an extremely important source of income for Mayos.
Ahí te va una. ¿Dónde estás? Los indios de aquí juntan y llevan a vender al mercado. En Guatabampo, en Navojoa. ¿Quieres comer pitaya, David? Sí. Pues ahí te va una. Porque ahorita ya se pasó el tiempo se cayeron ya las que se maduraron. En agosto, en julio, entonces cuando hay mucha pitaya. Dándoles algún carro en que transbordar la fruta más rápido al mercado, porque aquí nosotros juntamos la fruta y la tenemos que llevar a la carretera y llevarla otra vez al mercado. Y así como dices, uno o dos personas podían llevar la fruta a entregarla a los mercados. Y entonces sí se podía mantener la gente. Dice, ¿cómo no? Es un monte que no tiene fin. Y ya ves como ves la pitaya, todas las matas dan mucha fruta. En 2, 3 matas llenas una cubeta. Quiere decir que juntando la fruta hasta mediodía puedes llenar hasta 2, 3 cubetas o hasta más. Y de ahí se mantuviera la gente, pero pues así como dice, no hay ayuda.
This area, which is the highest concentration of organ pipe cactus on Earth, is scheduled to be leveled and replaced with irrigated farms run by agribusiness that will produce for other people a lot of money and very little for the Mayos. There is ample regeneration in this area of the cacti. They live a long time. 100 years is probably a reasonable figure. And there is good regeneration. There are younger ones. And if this were managed for production of pitaya fruit, with control of the cattle, there would be many more young ones come up. So in the long run, this could produce infinitely. Wiribiscu. Este es zaituna aquí, ¿no?
Es zaituna.
¿Tiene uso? ¿Comen la bola?
Para el ganado.
Ganado, ¿no?
Para el ganado, sí, es pastura para el ganado, para las chivas. La bolita esta de citabaro, es medicina para los ojos.
It seems like every single tree and leaf gets used by the Mayos. But no matter how often the machete falls, this kind of wide using of the land doesn't use it up. It all grows back in time. What will use it up, ironically, are narrower uses, like planting buffalo grass for cattle to graze on. Buffalo grass takes over and becomes the only plant.
One of the urgencies that we have found is the push among ranching interests to remove the tropical deciduous forest, to cut it down and replace it with an imported grass. And one of the things that we continue to learn is how strongly what we call the buffalization of Sonora is affecting the native peoples. It's not fair to be alarmist and say that it's something that's going to destroy them this year or next year or the year after next. But slowly we see more and more areas being cut. Some of our informants tell us that there is now less game, that the climate is hotter since the pastures next to them have been deforested. Some of them find it much more difficult to carry on their traditional way of life, and it's a death by inches. The best mirror to the soul of a native people is the plants that they live with and use in their lives. If you remove that context, if you take away their use, their relation to the soil, which is best related to the plants that they use, you are taking away their very relationship with their land. Take away their land and you have taken away their culture. Take away their culture and you no longer have a native people.
Fernando Valenzuela is a Mayo, becoming a winning pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's an example of assimilating we could learn from. If we could assimilate as much Mayo savvy as Fernando has baseball savvy, then we'd be onto something, wouldn't we? Something mutual.
Funding for The Desert Speaks has been provided by ASARCO Incorporated. ASARCO, producing the metals we all need, respecting the environment we all value. And headquartered in Tucson, Arizona, Intergroup Healthcare Corporation is a managed healthcare company serving more than 250,000 members. And by the Arizona Game and Fish Heritage Fund, Arizona's lottery dollars working for wildlife.